Hello, my name is Tony Jermy and welcome to this video on how to find evidence online. Now, to find evidence to support your academic study or writing an assignment, you need to try and make sure that evidence is credible. So you can't just look anywhere on the internet and find something, even if it suits your argument. It has to be from what we call a credible source. There's a couple of things you need to think about from that. So firstly, it needs to be from a reliable source. And generally speaking, most academic journals are going to be a relatively reliable source. And also things like government websites like NICE, for example, or the World Health Organization, websites like that are pretty reliable. But the wider internet can be a bit of a minefield. So where possible, try and stick with credible sources. So most people will be used to Googling things. And what we're going to do is we're going to use an extension of Google called Google Scholar. And if you're used to using Google, then you can also use Google Scholar nice and easily. So if you can't find it, you can use Google to find Google Scholar, but you've got the address here in the search bar, which is scholar.google.com. And it's going to give you a version of Google which only looks at academic journals and those kind of bits of content, so that straight away your information can be much more reliable. It won't give you things like NICE websites, the World Health Organization, NHS websites, so on and so forth. So you might need to use the wider internet to search for those resources, but it's going to give you your journals and articles, which is a great place to start. So let's use some search terminology, much like we would with Google. So let's look at, for example, infection control in operating theatres. Now, half of the game here is understanding how to search for things as well. So the keywords that we use are important, but actually we can start to limit this down. So we can see here we've got 42,700 results. So firstly, what Google Scholar can do is we can put a date range in. So I'm going to put from 2015, because generally speaking in healthcare, if it's older than 10 years old, unless it's like the original piece of text that I'm quoting from, it's dated, and we want to try and avoid that where possible. And we can see we've still got 17,600 results. So what I can do in the search terms is if I put, for example, quotation marks around the words operating theatres, that is going to search for the precise term operating theatre or operating theatres. If you just write operating theatres without quotation marks, then it's going to look for every time the word operating is used and every time the word theatres is used, but not necessarily together. So we can start to hone down our search criteria by the kind of things that we put into the search bar. So we can see here there's a couple of examples. Now, if you're logged in to your UEA network, you might see also that you've got access to these PDF documents here as well. But we'll look at one. Let's find one. And see whether we have access or not. So let's look at this one. Infection prevention and control considerations regarding ventilation in acute hospitals. So we're going to click on this. It's going to redirect us to a link. Obviously, you'll probably have to accept the cookies to the website. And what we're looking for is, do we have access to the full document? So it looks like we do here if we just scroll through it. And some of the websites, obviously all of the different company websites are slightly different, but what we're looking for is not only have we got access to the document, but do we have access to the PDF so that we can save it for later use? And this is relatively straightforward and apparent here. So it says view PDF, and it's going to open up the PDF in a new window. And this is what I'm looking for, is do I have access to the PDF so that I can save it to my computer? And it might mean that I can then come back and look at it at a later date. And obviously if I'm using it in my assignments, I need something to reference from. And if you don't save it to your computer, you'll think, oh, that was that really good assignment, and then you won't remember where you found it. So what we can see is we've got the name of the article, and we've also got the author. Now, when we do referencing, we will often use the author's last name and the date to reference this text. So this would be Humphreys, and the date we can see at the top here. is 2021. Let's go back then. So when I go to save it, so again, depending on what system you're using, you might have to right click on the document and then you can save as, or there's also a little download icon here. So let's right click and save as. And you can see sometimes it gives us this kind of not a very helpful file name to save. So what I like to do is I like to use the title of the name and the date, because that's the way I would reference it in the text, and then I'm going to put the title of the actual article. So I'm going to copy and paste that as the article name. So this is Humphreys and then 20. Try and avoid little things like semicolons and that, because it can sometimes be problematic with your file name. Humphreys 2021, little dash, and then paste the name, and then I'm going to just pop that into my downloads folder for now. And it's going to save it to my computer, which is great. So that's one way you can look for articles. Now, on some websites, you might not have the direct access. So if you don't have the direct access for whatever reason, if you can't click that PDF, it might say, for example, you need to pay for it. Please don't pay for it, because the university has already bought licenses to many, many providers. And my advice would be, if you are in a situation where you have to pay for it, then don't use that source. What you can do instead is you can look for a sign-in option. And when you click to sign in, each website will have the option to sign in, or the option to sign in via your organization. So if look for the sign in via organization, just type UEA and it will pop up with a UEA login. And then what this is going to do is it's going to log in through the institutional access which the university has paid for, and that will give you free access to many, many sites. So just to reiterate, do not pay for journal articles. Try and log in via an institutional login. Some sites will have it as Open Athens, some sites will have it as Shibboleth, or Shibboleth, sorry, and just search UEA and then log in via that way. Another way we can search for articles is using the UEA's library. So again, if you just Google UEA library and it will come up, and then search using the online resources, and we can again use the search bar here. So we can, same thing, so infection control, and then I'm going to use the quotation marks, operating theatres. So these quotation marks, or you can put, for example, an and in between it. These are called Boolean operators, which help to help our search criteria. So this is going to load all the results of, again, what the university has access to, but also electronic books. So this is a step extra over Google Scholar. But Google Scholar is probably easier to use because most people know how to use Google. So we can see here, these are some of the books that we've got. And again, remember, what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and make sure it's credible and evidence-based and it's current. So I'm going to go to my filters, and then again, I'm going to go to publish date within the last 10 years and just apply that. And again, we can then just scroll through and see what is useful to us. Now, this part of your academic writing, so finding the evidence to support your discussion, is probably one of the parts that takes the longest. So you just need to bear that in mind. What my advice to you would be is to spend a whole evening finding information, and then don't even read the articles. What you might want to do, so let's just find an article and I'll show you. So let's find a journal article, articles peer reviewed. So the way I would look at things, let's just use this top article as an example. So most articles will have an abstract. This will give you a flavour of what the main text is about. So I'd read the abstract, Okay, and if I had access to the full article, which I think I'm going to have to download to have a look at. So yeah, so download a PDF. So if I'm reading an article, I'll read the abstract to see if it's useful. Obviously, if it is, I might save it. If it's not, then I won't. And you can see you've got an introduction. This is a research study, so materials and methods, how the research was undertaken. And results. So I don't really need to worry about that. So I'd read the abstract, and maybe if I was interested, I might read the discussion at the end. So when you're initially searching for material, you need to kind of do it in a smart way so that you're not wasting time. And I'd spend a whole evening looking for materials, and then maybe come back another day and start to read those materials, and then maybe come back another day and sort of start to pull out kind of the ideas and things I want in terms of reference. So it does take a long time, and this is the problem. If you leave things till the last minute, then you don't have that time. Once you've downloaded your articles, then you need a way to store them on your device so that you can kind of keep track of them. And my advice is to have 3 folders for your assignments. For your supporting evidence, you want to have a folder where you've got things that you need to read, and then you're going to go into that folder, and then you're going to read those articles. And then once you've read them, transfer them to a red folder, and when you actually finally use them in your work, put them into a separate folder, a used folder, and that'll help keep them organized. Otherwise, you run the risk of having articles all over the place, difficult to find, and then what we find sometimes is that the articles that are included in the reference list at the end of your assignment don't always correspond to the articles that are referenced in text. So it does take a little bit of organization. It does take a little bit of initial work, naming the documents so they make sense, for example, but it's worth it in the long run in terms of organizing and finding that evidence. So I hope you found that useful, how to find and engage with evidence online. Try and use your journal articles if you can. If you need to use wider websites, make sure they're of a credible source. So it's going to be things like the NICE website, the British National Formulary, World Health Organization, NHS sites. The only thing I'm going to say with NHS sites is do consider who the NHS site is intended for, because if it's intended for the layperson, the terminology and the content might be simplified. And what we'd expect from you as a healthcare learner is that your level of knowledge would be at a higher level.